Sometimes it's fun to look at a story from a new perspective, not necessarily change the story. Like, for instance, maybe you have read some American history, and you can learn about the Revolutionary War a lot of different ways. You could read a book that just gives you all the facts and figures and tells you about the Revolutionary War. Or you could read a biography and maybe just see it from Jefferson's perspective, or Washington's perspective, or Madison's perspective. So I wanted to look at the whole story of redemption, the whole story of God's love for his people, for you and for me, from the perspective of one of my favorite characters in the Bible, light. Light. Now, light is really important. You need light to see where you're going. I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience of being in a dark room. And by dark room, I mean like a photographic dark room. We don't do much of that anymore because we take pictures with our phones and then we upload them to Facebook. But we used to take pictures on film. Especially you young people, pay attention to this. We used to take pictures on film and we had to send that film away and we had to wait for it to come back so we could see what the pictures actually looked like. But when you've been in a dark room, for any period of time, you start to feel. You don't just see the darkness, you feel it. It starts to, for some people, it becomes really oppressive. For some of us, we have a fear of the dark. So we need light. We need light bulbs. We need light during the day to see, and we need to turn on light at night. In fact, every bit of energy on this planet comes from that big light in the sky. Now, God is big on light. What is the very first thing God creates in the beginning of this story? God says, "Let there be light," and there is light. But it's more than that. If you read the story of Genesis a little more carefully, God likes light so much that he makes it twice. Have you ever noticed this? Because just a few days later, on I believe the fourth day of creation, God makes the sun and the moon and the stars. He loves light so much, he says, wow, that light. Remember light on day one, everybody? I really like that. Let's make that again. So there he is making light. We have sun, we have moon, we have stars. A little bit later, we get the story of Noah. Now, Noah is kind of a reboot. That's what they call it now. You know, when they make a movie about a character, they've done this with Spider-Man 3 times. Really annoys me. They got it right the first time, and then they had to do it again. But they keep doing this reboot. We're going to tell this story again. God kind of did a reboot there with Noah. He said, you know what? These people are really messed up. Hey, Noah, how about we start again with you? And God floods the earth, wipes everything out, starts again with just Noah and his family. But then God does something really interesting. God puts a box around what God is able to do. Because God makes a promise. He promises Noah something. He promises Noah, I'm never going to do that again. I'm just never going to do that again. And the sign of the promise was that rainbow. This rainbow appears in the clouds. If you read the story of Genesis carefully, you might notice something that sometimes people miss. Those great rains that fell and flooded the earth, in the story of Genesis, rain had never fallen before. There had never been so much as a sprinkle. This was a new thing. Not only was rain going to be new, but rain was going to wipe out the planet. No wonder nobody believed Noah. I mean, that's not actually kind of in the Bible, but you know, whenever you see it in the story, you see people saying, yeah, Noah, whatever, there's no rain coming. There's never been rain. I don't even know what this word rain means. So we have this rainbow in the clouds. God promising, I will never do that again. So now I'm going to fast forward. Again, this is the whole story of redemption from the point of view of light. A little later, we have the Exodus. And one of the last things that happens with the children of Israel and with Moses and with the Egyptians before they finally leave Egypt, so God sends a plague of darkness. Whenever I read that part, I think to myself of those times that I've been in a dark room. When I've been in a room where there truly is no light and you can feel it, and how uncomfortable that must have been. We really can't do a whole lot without light. Most of us on the planet rely on light for what we do. Yes, there are those who cannot see, and they learn to adjust. But if you've ever tried to learn to adjust, you know how hard it is. I have a little thing I do in the morning, which is wacky. But I don't know why, I just do this every morning. I wake up hours before my wife has to. So I'm moving around the bedroom and getting dressed and doing whatever I have to do before I take the dogs out without trying to wake my wife. So I will, among other things, try not to turn on lights. I use my cell phone light to see, and even that's too bright sometimes. So what I do is sometimes I just experiment. Even if there's a little light coming in, I just shut my eyes really tight and I try to see if I can feel my way. Every now and then I stub my toe. I don't know why I do this, but it's just something that I do. That darkness, that lack of light becomes an impediment to anything that I want to do. And for the ancient Hebrews, this was a sign to them, God saying, I am with you. Maybe not with them, but I am with you. So now we're going to fast forward again. The Exodus has happened. And now we're going to meet a character named Joshua. And one day Joshua commands the sun to stand still. Just says, sun, you stand still. It's in the heat of battle. And for some reason, you can read this in the book of Joshua. It's one of the most fun books of the Bible and one of the weirdest ones to read. If you ever want to read something really weird in the Bible, Joshua's a good place to start. The sun stands still. The light stops. Do you ever wonder what the people on the other side of the planet might have thought? They had an extra day of darkness. It's like, they must have felt like everything was ending. Because we rely on light so much. Now, I'm going to skip all the period of the judges and the kings and the exile. Because I told Dave, I said, I got a wonderful 90-minute sermon today. And Dave said, maybe shorter than that. So we're going to go a few hundred years later. And suddenly there's a new star in the sky that there's never been before. And it leads kings, shepherds, everybody to one spot in Bethlehem, where a king has been born, where, if you will, the light of the world has now begun. This light showing us that now we have a new light as a baby. This isn't a Christmas sermon, so I just kind of blast past this. But remember, we had the darkness. Unfortunately, there will be a darkness we need to get through to get to the end of this story. Because we find out, if we read the Bible, that during the time of the crucifixion, during that day, the sky grew dark. Now, the sky didn't grow dark like it was this morning at dawn, just before dawn. You could kind of see. I don't think so. I think this was kind of, have you ever been in the car driving when the really scary thunderstorm clouds that probably have tornadoes have suddenly appeared over you? I remember driving one day home from work, and I heard on the radio that there was a tornado warning right where I was. In fact, the tornado touched down less than 2 miles from where I was driving. And the sky was that sick green. And it was dark. It was so dark. It got dark within just a few minutes that all of the street lights that are activated by light came on. It was so dark. It was a dark that was terrifying because of everything else that was going on. So in this story of redemption on Good Friday, on that horrible, awful Good Friday, when the Savior of the world was murdered illegally, was tried and convicted illegally, and was killed and died so that we could be friends with God again. God just let that darkness happen. There was an earthquake. I can't imagine the fear. And no wonder. Jesus, looking out from the cross, all his friends were gone except one. And as I always like to remind people, the women were there. They didn't run away. Go women. But his friends, the ones who are going to start the church, all except one, just gone, hiding. And this darkness kind of just being a visible, palpable sense of God's anger and God's disappointment at who we were and at how great a price it was going to cost to bring us back to the garden. It would be okay, and it would be all right. It would be righteous and holy for God to have stopped the story at that point. Nothing wrong with it. That wasn't God's plan. In fact, all of this being God's plan, Jesus being God's plan, I always like to remind us, ourselves, everyone, especially around this time, God didn't do all of this creation in the beginning, and then when Jesus came along, it was plan B. Didn't work out with people, Jesus was plan B. Jesus was plan A the whole time. Just like you and I are plan A for reaching the world with the love of God. Plan A, there is no plan B. Jesus and the church, plan A. Plan B doesn't exist. But God could have stopped right there. There's no reason God couldn't have stopped right there and said, that's it. I paid the price for their sins. Now they don't have to go to the nasty bad place, but that's as far as I go. But our final light in this story is the sunrise on Resurrection Day. The sun came up because the Son came out of the tomb. Rose from the dead. All of our hope is based on that. And I want to remind us of something as we go from this place today that's really, really important. We tend to celebrate things once a year. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, Easter, Memorial Day, whatever it is. We tend to have these things we celebrate once a year. And that's really a good idea. It's a great idea. But for the early Christians, they looked at the history of redemption and how it had been fulfilled in Jesus, and they said, you know what? Not only are we going to celebrate this every week, but instead of gathering on the seventh day like we always did, we're going to gather on the day the Lord rose. They literally moved their celebration a day from Saturday to Sunday. We want to make sure that we celebrate the resurrection every single Sunday, not once a year. Every Sunday is, in a very real sense, Easter Sunday. But I think it's more than that. I think the way that God has woven redemption into the fabric of creation should remind us to celebrate this every time we see the sunrise. I believe that the reason that the physical universe was created so that the sun sets and rises was so that God would let us be reminded that this is a new day. This is a new day, just like the new day when Jesus rose for the first time. The sun rises every day just the same way the sun rose from the dead. Every single day is new. You look at yesterday, you just put it behind you. Today is new. It is new life, new day. Yes, we see death, resurrection modeled in creation. We're seeing the resurrection because it's spring and all the leaves are coming on the trees and the flowers have come out and my tulips in the front of my house look beautiful. But every single day, every sunrise, that is our reminder that this Jesus who died has risen, is alive again, is the light of the world as we carry that same light of the world into our world through loving and serving our neighbor as Jesus loved and served us.